Judging a person is a huge mistake you make in life. It can bring many consequences, and often we don't get a second chance to apologize or regret. See how this police officer treated his new boss, abusing his power, but was surprised when he was introduced as his superior at the station. These acts of judgment often occur when someone thinks they are superior to another. See the story below. But before that, like and subscribe to our channel. It motivates me to keep bringing these life reflections to you. It was a cloudy afternoon in the small town, with heavy clouds announcing a rain that seemed never to arrive. The streets were almost deserted, as if the town had taken a day off. Roberto, a police officer in his early 30s, was driving his patrol car with a bored expression. He always considered himself a smart guy, someone who rose in the police ranks thanks to his keen eye. That day, he had no idea his perception would be tested in an unexpected way. Roberto grew up in a middle-class neighborhood where he always felt safe. When he became a police officer, he brought with him a bit of the arrogance of someone who thinks they know everything about the streets. He used to say he could sense when something was out of place. It was in this mindset that he spotted Carlos, a young black man in his early 30s, walking calmly through a simpler neighborhood in town. Carlos was wearing an impeccable suit, which contrasted with the surroundings. To Roberto, the scene didn't make sense. What is a guy like that doing here? He thought, furrowing his brow. Without thinking twice, he pulled the car over next to Carlos and got out, adjusting his utility belt as if preparing for a serious encounter. "Hey, you!" Roberto called out, with a tone that mixed suspicion and authority. Carlos stopped, turning slowly without losing his composure. Roberto continued, "Where do you think you're going?" Carlos looked at Roberto with a calmness that seemed to challenge the police officer's aggressive approach. He knew what was happening. He had been through this before. Keeping a polite tone, he responded, "Good afternoon, officer. I'm heading to a meeting." But for Roberto, that wasn't enough. He was determined to find something wrong, as if he needed to justify the stop. And unknowingly, he was about to take the first step in a lesson that would change his life forever. Roberto crossed his arms and gave a short, humorless laugh. His eyes scanned Carlos from head to toe, as if he were some sort of puzzle that didn't quite fit there. The silence between them was heavy, loaded with unspoken judgment. Roberto stepped a bit closer, making it clear he wasn't there for a friendly chat. "A meeting, huh? And what kind of meeting would that be?" Roberto asked, with a tone full of irony. "You don't seem to be from around here." Carlos took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He knew that any wrong reaction could be misinterpreted. With a steady gaze, he replied, "It's a business meeting. I don't think that's a reason to be stopped, officer." But Roberto didn't seem willing to back down. He stepped forward, invading Carlos's personal space. The officer looked at the suit, the watch on Carlos's wrist, and then back at him. "Show me your ID, and make it quick," he demanded, as if he had already decided there was something wrong. Carlos, with slow and careful movements, took his wallet out of his pocket and handed his ID to Roberto, maintaining his steady gaze. The officer grabbed the document with disdain, without taking his eyes off Carlos, determined to find something to justify his suspicion. Roberto held Carlos's ID with a critical look, as if expecting to find some obvious flaw. The silence dragged on, and Carlos remained quiet, his patience being tested with every second. Then, from the radio on Roberto's belt, came an urgent voice, calling all officers to a critical situation at the station. Clearly annoyed, Roberto let out a heavy sigh and returned Carlos's ID dismissively, almost throwing it to the ground. Not bothering to hide his disdain, he muttered, "You got lucky today. Get out of here before I change my mind." Carlos calmly bent down to pick up his ID, maintaining his dignity, even after the humiliation. He gave a slight nod of his head, a gesture of respect, but his eyes showed a flicker of disappointment. Without saying another word, he turned and continued on his way, knowing that reacting would only feed Roberto's attitude. Roberto got into the patrol car and sped toward the station, still bothered, as if he felt something had slipped out of his control. Little did he know that this encounter would be just the beginning of something much bigger, something he could never have predicted. Upon arriving at the station, Roberto noticed that the atmosphere was more agitated than usual. The officers were grouped in small circles, whispering nervously. Something big was about to happen, but no one seemed willing to give details. Roberto walked past, ignoring the murmurs, and headed to the conference room, where the chief, Captain Souza, was already waiting for him and the other officers. "Attention, everyone!" announced the captain, slapping a folder on the table to get everyone's attention. "Today, we have an important change in leadership. I want you all to welcome our new police chief with respect." Roberto, leaning against the wall, barely paid attention. To him, it was just another boss like any other. But when the door opened, all murmurs instantly ceased. Roberto's eyes widened at the sight of who was entering the room. Carlos, the man he had so arrogantly confronted, entered with firm steps and impeccable posture, wearing the same suit from their previous encounter. He positioned himself at the front of the room, facing everyone with a look that combined firmness and serenity. Roberto felt the ground open up beneath his feet. Carlos, the man he had treated with disdain, was now his new boss. The shock was so great that he could barely process what was happening. And, seeing the slight smile on Carlos's lips, he knew this moment would be unforgettable. The conference room was completely silent, everyone still processing the big reveal. Roberto felt the weight of the moment like a punch to the stomach. His mind spun, replaying every detail of his encounter with Carlos the day before. Carlos's confident posture and serene gaze now seemed like a lesson in calmness in the face of adversity. Carlos began his speech, his firm voice echoing through the room. He spoke about the future of the station, the importance of respect and unity within the team, and how he hoped for positive changes for everyone. As he spoke, Roberto felt a mix of shame and regret growing inside him. He wanted to disappear, to escape the furtive glances of his colleagues who clearly remembered his harsh treatment of Carlos. When Carlos looked directly at Roberto, the officer felt a chill run down his spine. But to his surprise, Carlos maintained a professional tone, without mentioning the incident. Instead, he continued to focus on his message of leadership and progress. When he finished, Carlos thanked everyone for their welcome and asked for their cooperation in making the station a better place for the community. Roberto knew he would have to face his new boss, not just as a figure of authority, but as a living reminder of his own mistakes and prejudices. He realized that more than ever, it was time to reflect and change. After the meeting, Roberto left the room with his head full. He isolated himself in a corner of the station, trying to organize his thoughts. The weight of what had happened seemed to grow with every second. He remembered the harsh words he had spoken to Carlos and how he had judged someone just by their appearance. Shame consumed him, and for the first time, Roberto felt he needed to confront not just Carlos, but himself. As he walked through the hallways, his colleagues cast curious glances, some even whispering about the situation. It was impossible to ignore the discomfort. Roberto knew that the attitude he had taken the previous day had not been right, and now he was paying the price for his impulsiveness. He made his way to the locker room, where he stared at himself in the mirror. The reflection showed a man who, until then, had never questioned his actions. But now, in light of this situation, Roberto saw himself in a new way. He thought about all the times he had judged someone without knowing their story and realized he was facing a unique opportunity to redeem himself. He knew he needed to speak with Carlos, not just to apologize, but to show that he was willing to change. With a deep sigh, Roberto decided it was time to act. He stood up, determined to face his mistakes head-on, and headed to Carlos's office, ready for the hardest confrontation, the one with his own conscience. Roberto reached Carlos's office door, his heart racing. He hesitated for a moment, questioning if he should really go through with it. But he knew he couldn't keep running away. He knocked softly, and upon hearing Carlos's voice inviting him in, he opened the door and entered. Carlos was seated, reviewing some documents. When he saw Roberto, he looked up, maintaining a calm expression. Roberto took a deep breath and, without beating around the bush, began. "Chief Carlos, I need to apologize. I was rude and prejudiced yesterday, and I'm ashamed of how I behaved. I was wrong in every way, and I want you to know that I'm willing to learn and change." Carlos observed Roberto in silence for a few seconds, assessing his sincerity. Then he stood up, walked around the desk, and stood in front of Roberto. There was something in Carlos's eyes that conveyed both authority and understanding. "Roberto, I appreciate your words. We all make mistakes, but what matters is how we choose to act afterward," Carlos said, his tone firm, but without rancor. "I hope this serves as a lesson, not just for you, but for everyone here. Our job is to protect and serve the community, and that starts with respect for everyone, without exception." Roberto nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He extended his hand and Carlos shook it firmly. In that simple gesture, Roberto found an opportunity to start anew and become a better police officer, committed to correcting his faults. With that sincere handshake, Roberto felt a new determination growing within him. Carlos gave a slight smile and, without further words, returned to his desk. Roberto left the office with the sense that he had taken an important step in his personal and professional journey. From that day on, Roberto dedicated himself to showing that the change was real. He began to engage more with the community and to treat everyone with the respect they deserved. Every interaction was an opportunity to correct his mistakes and build a new reputation. Carlos, in turn, implemented several initiatives to improve the relationship between the police and the community. Roberto's approach visibly changed, and he started working alongside Carlos on various projects, learning the importance of listening to and understanding people rather than judging them. A few months later, during a team meeting, Carlos gave special recognition to Roberto, praising his effort and progress. Roberto, in front of his colleagues, expressed his gratitude and admitted that the experience had been a valuable lesson in humility and growth. The work at the station continued with a new spirit of cooperation and respect, and Roberto became an example of how, even after making mistakes, it is possible to redeem oneself and transform. The path was not easy, but the will to change made all the difference. And so, both Roberto and Carlos found a new beginning, based on mutual respect and constant learning. This lesson is also for everyone, in every profession and job. We should always respect others, and in doing so, our coexistence will always be good. Now, I want to know what you thought of this life reflection. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I always bring various reflections for you. See you in the next video, and God bless you.